So I'd just like to welcome everyone here today and thank you for being here. We've got a fantastic group of researchers with us for this roundtable talking circle discussion today around the theme of young minds and music. And we originally came together as a collective of this group plus many more fantastic researchers at Griffith University and outside with some of our partners to put together what's called a spotlight proposal for a Griffith University research focus area. And through that process, we just developed a really inspiring and creative group of people who I think really achieved a lot of mutual learning in a very short space of time, but also were really excited about the potential to work together across the disciplines of human services and social work, child and family development, community music, music composition. We've got people from psychology, from child protection. So we really were looking at the role that music can play in childhood development, healing, creativity for infants and children. And so we had, really fantastic discussions. And what you're going to hear today in this session is really just a little snapshot of those discussions from some of the researchers involved, but also we hoping to take a little step forward. Our next step may be in these collaborative interdisciplinary conversations. So we really are aiming to set off on a pathway of collaborative interdisciplinary research that's very applied, very much connected to communities and our partner organisations in 2021. So I will, in a minute, initiate the talking circle in 2 rounds. And what we're going to do is hear an idea, a concept, a theory, an activity that inspires and speaks to each of the participants today, one that they would like to contribute and share with this group, this collective of interdisciplinary researchers. And then we're going to do a second round of the talking circle where each of our participants today is going to respond to one another's ideas from their unique standpoint, from their unique experience as a professional, a practitioner, and a researcher. So before I go any further in that, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands from which we are all joining the meeting today and from which all audience members are viewing from today. I acknowledge elders past, present and emerging, which is particularly important when we're talking about young minds and music and development creativity for the future, for the benefit of everyone. I'd like to also acknowledge the vastly important role of the arts and music in particular in First Nations communities in Australia and elsewhere. These are positive determinants of health and well-being that are millennia old. They hold the culture, they carry the culture, and they carry important processes for communities like law, LORE, law, human rights, education, health and well-being practices, astronomy are carried and shared through the arts. So I acknowledge that broader context of our work as well for First Nations communities and many of the otherwise diverse communities that we represent as a collective and that we really love working with as well. So in terms of the circle, we're in a sort of a Zoom tile format, but the circle we're going to hear first from Kerry Smith today, and I'll ask each person to just do a brief introduction of themselves. And then we're going to move to Karen Schaup. And then after Karen, we will hear from Marilyn Casey, and then finishing each iteration of the circle with Charulatha Mani. Drawn a little talking circle here, and I've got Kerry, then Karen, and then Marilyn, and then Charu. So if you want to know where we are in the circle, maybe you could draw that for yourself as well. So whenever you're ready, Kerry, can I pass over to you to do a little introduction of yourself and then sharing your idea that you want to contribute to this collective?
Thanks, Naomi. As Naomi said, my name is Kerry Smith, and presently I'm at Griffith University and I teach in the undergraduate program in child and family studies, and my I guess interest is around the 0 to 5-year-old group of children, and I've been engaged with that age group through a lifetime of early childhood teaching, training others, and also now in the world of academics, as well as having a connection with family daycare. And that's, I guess, where my research interest is moving into. How does family daycare make connections with children? Why do families use family daycare? I guess on that, though, as far as child development goes, I'm interested in the neurosequential model of therapeutics, which I've been sort of found out about probably 5 years ago, and have done a lot of learning in that area. And so I'm just going to put up share a slide that I can talk to a little bit. So this comes from Bruce Perry, who's a neuroscientist, and I say up front, I'm not a neuroscientist. I just look at it from a child development viewpoint. I look at the research that is telling us how important an understanding, at least, of brain development is in looking at the way children develop and how the brain connects to everything else for the child. So you see here, the brain develops from the bottom up. So from the brain stem up into the cortex. So if we're looking at infants and young children, the interest really is around the brain stem, moving up into the limbic system. So where does music come into all of that? And it's a very, very important element for children's development, because it adds so much to them in regards to calmness, in regards to creating, I guess, a bridge to connections and to relationships. If we go back to the cradle and the rocking and the lullabies, why do people do that? I think it's intuitive in a way, and also it's really relating to this soothing and sensory-based activities within the brainstem. And then we move into movement and coordination. So there's music, again, can be used as that strategy to build. So that creates, as I said, that calmness in children. For those children that have suffered trauma, the research is showing us that if we go back to the sensory side of development, we can help repair the brain. And we can talk about black holes and trauma and those sorts of things. That's probably for another day. So I guess that's my passion, is to look at how we can use the neurosequential model to work with children that are vulnerable, and then how we can connect that with using music and spotlight that. So thank you.
Thank you, Kerry. What a fantastic start to the Talking Circle round 1. And I know that your introduction of the neurosequential model for therapeutics and education was really central in the spotlight discussions that brought us all together in the first place. And I know there was a lot of excitement there, both as a way of responding to trauma, but also for children and families who may not have experienced trauma but may still benefit from really exploring those links between music and development. So yes. Fantastic. So over now to you, Karen, for your contribution round 1.
I'm Karen Sharp. I'm an artistic researcher at the Queensland Conservatorium Research Centre. I'm predominantly a performing guitarist, occasional actor. I create projects, and I'm a kind of a serial collaborator on all kinds of artistic projects. Most recently and I guess most passionately in the last few years across disciplines, across arts disciplines. My teaching at the Conservatorium is centered around teaching the guitar and teaching performance-based courses, performance enhancement, stage fright, and so on. My personal interest in music and children actually began when I had my own children. And I noticed when I had my daughter how incredibly strongly she responded to music, actually while she was still in the womb. And she would respond to my playing, which obviously she could hear very well right next to her in the womb, but also after she was born. And I was inspired to make a CD, which is probably the most intuitive based project I've ever done. I recorded a CD called Cradle Songs of Lullabies from Around the World, which I chose based really just on my own intuition of what would soothe a child. I recorded them in studio and I played each of them as though I were playing for my daughter and trying to help her soothe and get to sleep. Out of that process, I then, after I had done all of the recording, met a wonderful pediatrician who was also a lullaby researcher, Dr. Robin Brady, from the Children's Hospital at the time, and she actually sort of showed me what I had done and why it was working and why it would work. I had sort of, again, just purely intuitively recorded the music at the right pace for a baby's heart rate to settle down. I had recorded the music. There's research to show that babies, even strange babies, respond differently to a musician who was performing for their own child than someone who was just making a recording, even if they, are highly professional and play very well. So that was all very interesting to me. I then started doing concerts for babies, again, something I never would have imagined myself doing before I became a mother. And again, as a musician, I was deeply struck by how strongly even very, very young babies of, maybe 3 or 4 months old responded to the music. And, they stopped wriggling, they stopped screaming, and they actually listened. And this was replicated around Australia in different venues with different babies. The maximum number of babies we had, I think, was 80. None of this, unfortunately, was formally documented. I have video evidence and so on. It was before my time at the university, so I was doing artistic research without documenting in any formal process. But that really began my passion for realizing how much potential music has, how much potential live music has, and music that is performed with an intent to soothe. And I think that's a really, for me, a really central point as an artistic researcher, is that that intent, and that when we intend to communicate something, that becomes imbued in the music, even without text, without the voice. In my case, I just play the guitar, and I played these tunes, as I said, from around the world. So that's my interest, and I guess my passion now is to continue to make music and to bring music to children. I think we need music, particularly for young children, more than ever, because we are facing a time where music is actually quite quickly diminishing in all of our early and primary and even high school, to some extent, settings in education, and before that even in childcare. And I think that's a great tragedy and a real, we've really lost our way with realizing what the value of music is. And so I suppose that's really where my passion is, to try and make music that is, it can give something to children, but also to really advocate for the value of music, music listening, and of course music making for young children. So that's my That's my passion. So that's why I'm part of this group. And I hope to be able to bring some of the, obviously, the much more scientific and academic knowledge into a practical sphere by actually realizing and making projects that are, that can be brought to children, either to engage children in music or to actually as active participants or just as listeners, because I think children, especially these days, especially young children for some reason, I've just played, kind of what I call tinned music. It's not even made on real instruments. And if you look at, the sort of albums that are available for babies, the vast majority, probably over 80%, are actually music made on synthesizers. And that's a real shame, because actually babies can tell the difference.
Wow, really interesting, Karen. Thank you so much for that contribution, and I think really rich storytelling, but also provocations in there for us all to think about as we're going forward as creative professionals, as creative researchers, and traditional researchers engaged in this research. I love the way that you spoke about the intentionality of the performer and how important that was in the work that you did. And I think, you're talking about bringing that, systematic approaches to maybe evaluating some of the outcomes of those types of performance with infants and children. But then, I guess in this group, we're really intrigued and hopeful about the influence that creative professionals and creative researchers, arts-based researchers, can have in non-arts disciplines like human services and social work, like health, like psychology as well. So very much interested in that multi-way learning. Can't wait to see how that's all going to unfold in the next 12 months. Karen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Over to you. Yes, over to you now, Marilyn, to hear your first round contribution.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to this conversation. And just to give a little background, I'm Marilyn Casey. I work and teach and do research with Kerry Smith. We're both in the teach in the undergraduate Bachelor of Child and Family Studies. And part of coming into this group, not only did Kerry and I come in from an early childhood perspective, we also came in from having a lot of experience in working with people that work with children. And we then, over the years, this started many years ago, and Kerry probably has that date that I don't. Can you help me out, Kerry? How long ago was it, this model?
Oh gosh, I think we probably at least nearly 20 years now.
Yes. So it started out, again, a group of people that worked in early childhood, and we noticed that the training or the pre-service training and the value of people that work with very young children probably was better 20 years ago, but over the years it's been eroded. And so we end up with people working with very young children that maybe haven't learned some of the broader skills that you need to work with children and families. And because of that, during our time as, working out in the field with students on prac, we developed this process of having a conversation that help bring people together that do want to think otherwise or shape better practice. So this is where this model comes in, and we thought it sat very nicely in a multidisciplinary group that want to pursue some research together that where we are coming from different disciplines. We've also used this in the courses that in our specialty courses in child and family studies. And it really helps people to think differently again, about practice and being able to listen in a more generative way. So we hear what emerges when a group of people come together. And, you know, just today, what Naomi is doing in talking circles, that's, you know, this comes from sort of that ancient wisdom of how we talk together, where people, you know, where that power is diminished, and we really can start to listen to each other's perspectives and what emerges from a group. So this model is called the Circle of Change Revisited. And as I said, this is the concept that we thought might work within this group, not only designing the research proposal or questions, but then as almost embedded in terms of how whatever we do come up with in terms of, you know, performance of music with children, or understanding how the brain fits with why children or young people might, you know, even including them in the conversation in terms of what this might mean for them. So it really is a nicely designed and proven. We have done some research around you know, the outcome of using this process over time and embedding it in practice. So we have evidence that it does work. So just looking at this model, we always start out with setting protocols, just like Naomi did today. She talked about how we were going to be together. Often that's done within the group. That helps us to build the relationship we need in order to be safe enough to talk openly with each other. So once we've created that relationship through a safe place, we can start to deconstruct what it is that we're talking about. So deconstruct is really about what is. From there, we move to confronting our own values and beliefs and things that we might take for granted, which comes from our habitual ways of thinking. And often then we're only speaking and listening from our own perspective. So we need to confront that so that we can open up to consider other people's perspectives. So once we start to listen to each other in a more generative way, we start to open up our ears to hear what you're saying or what I'm saying from your perspective, or vice versa. So we're open enough that I'm not only listening to you from my own habitual ways of thinking. And doing that helps us to uncover what it is we know collectively, but what are the gaps in our knowledge, and where could we then find that additional knowledge that might help us consider what's next, almost, what's emerging. So that really goes then to a point where we start to consider the perspectives that are emerging as we sit together. And one of the things we say to our students, and we know it works within the group, is to stop at that point and think about the unthinkable. So, for example, what would happen? What are the consequences if we didn't go forward with this, knowing what we know? What about those babies whose parents might not understand brain development, not understand why singing to the child's heartbeat or playing music to a heartbeat might be beneficial to their child, to that bonding, which lots of people don't know. And in fact, my students tell me all the time, why didn't we learn this, in high school? Why didn't I learn this before I had a baby? Because it would make a big difference to how I might interact with babies. And then going back to the fact that if someone's traumatized, as Kerry mentioned, once you understand where the trauma came from and when it impacted, that's when you can go back and think about where that child is at socially and emotionally, and start to work there to develop the synapses that never happened in their brain. So what's unthinkable is that we know in some ways that this is possible, but what's unthinkable is not to do something about it. So then that helps us to reconstruct what we are, you know, what could be thinkable, what could be possible. And from there, then we can start to develop prototypes or different ways of thinking that will either shape practice or improve practice. So that's our model in a nutshell. I did put up the questions. Well, not necessarily the questions, but the process we go through, which is deconstructing that artifact, which means pulling apart the main tenets of an experience, a policy, a practice, whatever it is that we want to understand better. Then we confront it, as I said before, so we can approach it from not only our personal reactions, but also from what's going on socially or systemically that, you know, often we don't talk about. You know, I always call it what's underneath the carpet. What are those untouchable topics that we actually have to confront head on? Then, as I said, we need to understand what we know and what we don't know, so that we can start to link, evidence from research with some of our own intuitiveness, as was mentioned before. So that then we can come together to engage in change and be more mindful in our own practice. So that's my contribution to the group. Thank you for listening.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Marilyn. It was fantastic. And I think I even felt a sense of safety and security thinking ahead to us using a framework like that to guide and shape the collaboration. Mm-hmm. And just the way you talk about, you know, everyone having that equal input and us being able to work with that. And so many interdisciplinary projects, there's so much value in them, but sometimes we can sort of be so enthusiastic that we charge in without the support of having those structures or those processes in place. But so it really, I think it's going to be a great contribution, tried and tested as well. And also with that critical underpinning, because I think a key commitment of this group is to promote human rights for children, for infants, to listen to their voices in many different contexts, and to be able to work collaboratively and quite fluently across academic contexts, including arts-based research contexts, including performance, community music, as we spoke about before, and even reaching out and working with families and all the full range of professionals who come into contact with children and infants and their families. So yeah, fantastic to have that resource on the table and experienced practitioners around that. So thank you, Marilyn. So I'll now hand over to Charu to finish the first round of our talking circle with her contribution.
Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Charumani and I'm from India. I'm Australian at the moment because I took my citizenship around a couple of months ago. So yeah, I'm Indian Australian. I am part of the conservatorium. I manage the research center here at the moment. And I got my PhD from here in 2019. I have a passion for the voice because I'm a singer. I'm a singer researcher. So my locus from where my ways of being and ways of knowing originate have always been my voice, and associated with the voice. So if you think of the voice as a central kind of a magnet, the other rays that have informed that magnetic flux or the energy or the current that goes around the magnet are, one is language, native language, my language, mother tongue, which is Tamil in my case, but the way in which the language plays with the body and the mind and just the feeling of language. The other one is musical syntax and the way in which melody, ornamentation, rhythm, intonation, and factors central to music fit into that strand. And the third spoke of that wheel could be thought of as the cultural framework that sustains me as a migrant at the moment. And the fourth is those reinforced and resisted paradigms that we keep coming up against in the social construct that we're all imbricated in. So these four spokes have constantly been informants in my life in the way I think about how song, language, which, I mean, song is a beautiful word because it brings together a lot. It brings together, as Naomi said in the beginning, tales, stories, lore, beliefs, faiths, values, morals, and, you know, and cultures in all their robustness together in one framework, a unified framework of song. So song has been central to my exploration here as a researcher as well. And currently, I'm very interested in the ways in which song, especially lullabies and other songs, play out in the lives of migrant and refugee women and infants. So I'm working at the moment on a grant that has been funded by the Logan City Council. I'm working with the midwives from Metro South Health, and I'm also working with the community liaison group from Access Community Services. And together, we're coming together and working with migrant and refugee women who are pregnant or who have recently delivered. And these sessions happen every Tuesday. We go in there and some of the antenatal messages are given about health and well-being in that context. Inevitably, when the singing happens, the messages become easier to fathom, simpler to understand, and the minds become more open. And the point is, we know that these outcomes happen, but the micro ways in which these outcomes are operationalized are yet to be fully understood. And I think that is where the contribution of this group is going to be extremely important and, in fact, path defining. Because the recent book on music and well-being from a group of excellent scholars from the UK, the Oxford Handbook, explicitly identifies that at the moment, we have a lot of outcomes. We have a lot of randomized controlled trials telling us that these outcomes have come about. We have qualitative studies telling us this. But the pathways, how do these things happen? And why do things happen the way they do are still under-researched. And every day I go in, and every week when I go into these workshops, I learn a bit more about how these processes are being played out. So it's kind of slowing down time a bit. And the other day I was telling Bridie here, who's the director of the QCRC, I said, Bridie, when I go into these sessions, I sometimes forget where I am or who I am. Because when I hear these women sing, they would have been shy. They wouldn't have come, they wouldn't have spoken at all. They'd be just nursing the baby. But when the song starts, then the hand starts moving. And that speaks to your model, Kerry, where, the movement gently. So the hand starts moving and they start smiling at the child and stroking the child. So there's that sensorial attachment happening. And then they look at the child and they start singing, and then something just happens. The warmth in the room increases. And then, it's just music as a way of being able to explain things and at the same time being so inexplicable. And that's what is so fascinating. And it goes well with neuroscience in that way, I think, because these two are cousins. So that's me, the first round.
Thank you so much, Charu. And again, it's just bringing new layers, new threads to the conversation, but also really already starting to weave your threads and your stories with those of the other participants. as has happened with various contributions as we've gone around the talking circle in the first round, which is amazing. It's amazing to see that empathetic listening and conversation happening all at once from many different angles, many different standpoints, disciplines, backgrounds. So it's absolutely joyous to watch and to listen to, even after this first round. So I'm really keen now for us to move into the second round of the talking circle. And this is where we reflect back. We might share what inspired us about something that one other participant said, or all of the participants, a thread that you've noticed that runs between them, or even something that's sitting uneasily with you based on where you're coming to the conversation from. And that discomfort may be really fruitful for us as we go forward to indicate, okay, let's shine some light toward that area and have those critical, interdisciplinary, respectful, generative conversations that Marilyn was talking about, bringing our combined wisdom, knowledge, expertise, everything to bear on those uncomfortable areas, as well as, you know, those really joyous, loving spaces and warm spaces that Charu talked about. So again, we'll go in the same order, which we'll move around the same circle in the order again, and just hear from you in whatever way feels grounded and important and authentic to you today, in this time, in this space. We'd love to hear what you're thinking at this moment. So over to you, Kerry.
Thank you, Naomi. So if I just say what pops up in my mind, because we're having a lot of time to think about it really, but I just think whole of listening to this, it just all fits together. There's something in everything that has meaning for young minds and music, from the intuitive cradle songs, and I just think the matching of that model of critical thinking, that we could even take, say, the artifact of what Karen's put together and even just think it through, to the impact that song has on people. And I was just thinking when Charu was speaking, and I was suddenly seeing that serve and return that we talk about with connection and relationships, that the music created again that conduit for serve and return between the mother and the infant. I don't think anything really sits in an uncomfortable feeling with me at the moment, except, wow, this is so big. How do we put it together in a succinct sort of way? And I think we're going to have to be quite careful about where we want it to lead, because I think there's lots here that could go in many different directions. So I think there's got to be a bit of hard talking about what it is that we really want to bring to light.
Yeah. Okay, great start. Thank you, Kerry. Fantastic. I love that idea of serve and return too. Another concept to bring into the conversation.
Look, it's just so inspiring to listen to everybody. A few things struck me. First of all, in what Charu said, it really struck me that in bringing the mothers together, normally those kinds of mother group situations, when they're run from a medical perspective, tend to actually, in my perhaps slightly controversial opinion, actually really undermine the intuition of the mother, because the mothers are told, this is what you do if this happens, and this is this, and this is that. And so I think, I know from having my own children, you start to actually doubt yourself. And I think what music can do in those situations is bring you back to yourself and to your heart and to your intuition. And I think that's why it's so valuable. And obviously the lullabies from a disparate of you know, these far and wide cultures, that there's a universal truth, and there's a universal kind of language there in that music, which brings the mothers together and brings them into themselves and into their very real and incredibly important and health-giving connection with their children. So I think that's worth acknowledging, that it's actually doing something that all of the talking and all of the medical advice and all of the things that normally happen in a lot of the mothering groups actually can't do in the same way. And the second thing that really struck me is that circle, that chart that you had, Marilyn, which you and Kerry have worked with, and I thought it was just wonderful. It struck me that it actually relates quite strongly to what Charu said, because we actually have the evidence, and there are so many studies showing the value of music and showing the effect that it has. But what we haven't done, or perhaps we have, but we're preaching to the converted amongst ourselves, what we haven't done is manage to affect that that shift in thinking. I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact word. Can you tell me the word that you used? It wasn't shift.
Or the thinking otherwise.
The thinking otherwise, yeah. And that's the thing that I think we haven't done. And I think doing more studies and showing more evidence of what has already been shown may not be the best way forward, because actually the evidence is there. And what we need to do is show its application. And kind of, I suppose, make a statement by doing rather than proving. And
can I pop in there, just Marilyn, speaking our turn, but we found with the research we've done about using this framework is that for any mindset, any concept to change, you need to go through the process at least 4 times. So you can show the evidence, you can run a training session, whatever, and that's, I guess, our research is showing that doesn't change the mindset. So all the research that Marilyn and Jenny Cartmel and others have done over the years has shown that during the 4th session, usually there is a shift in thinking otherwise. For some people, not. But for many, it's four of those conversations at least. Do you agree, Marilyn?
Yes, totally. Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
Thanks, Kerry. And Karen, where were you headed with that?
Oh no, I look, not sort of anywhere other than let's try to apply what we already know, and and try to really, I suppose, try to have a role in that that shift, outside of the university. I think amongst in society, in the people that influence education and so on. I think we have a role to play in actually applying what we already know and kind of showing what it can do.
Yeah, I think there's some powerful words there, Karen, for sure. And just the last little bit you said, I was starting to think of that adage in songwriting, in particular lyric writing, of show, don't tell. Like show and evoke and get people to listen with their whole bodies, by evoking, those powerful experiences, those powerful images, sensorial engagement, multi-sensorial engagement, rather than just telling and proving based on, whatever, evidence already exists, as you and Charu have talked about. So really, really powerful stuff emerging. Thank you both so far, for Kerry and Karen, for launching into this round of the circle. Can we now move to you, Marilyn? Where are you at? What are you thinking?
Okay, well, first of all, I want to go to a baby concert because I want to
have to bring a baby.
I want to experience that. But the thing I think that struck me the most was the way Charla spoke about voice. So you put voice in the middle, and voice can mean a whole bunch of things, right? From song, as you said, but voice is about listening. I mean, I just loved having voice in the middle, and then understanding as both. Well, I think we've all come up with, starting to understand that we can't just we have knowledge that, like, that's when I was getting to the unthinkable. What's unthinkable still for me is that we know all this stuff, but yet there's no way of we haven't shifted minds. In fact, we're going backwards instead of forward in many, many ways. Like you mentioned before, Karen, the disappearance of music for numbers of reasons. So that's the mindset, isn't it? Because we do know when you bring people together and you there is performance, you get goosebumps. So it's embodied. And that experience will be the thing that shifts your mind more than anything. So it's how to do that, I think. And so I just love that model that you presented to us, Charla. And I think that, because you could see the link between the brain development and how music is, it's just intertwined. So I think we've got such a good start. The only thing that I thought was missing, and maybe this is because I watch my son parent, and I think men get left out. And, so I would hope that, we can ensure that men, learn their mind can shift too, and how serve and return works and how attachment works. So that would be the one thing that I think we have to not forget. And most of attachment theory now does talk about more than one attachment being important, particularly Bruce Perry. He talks about us being, coming from a tribal way of being to these individuals now. And the only thing, and that's what's missing is the extended community in building relationship and doing better. So that's my, again, I just think there's so much similarity and energy here that we almost have to do this. We can't not do it now.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, absolutely. And with you can hear the passion rising in people's voices as we talk and as we get further and further into the conversation. And just what you finished on there about the communities of care around children and young people really reminds me of a thought that I keep coming back to. When we originally brought the collective together, we talked about young minds and music. But every time I say that, read it or hear it, I think young minds and music, young hearts and music, young spirits and music, young, places and young people. So, I guess that's part of the thinking otherwise too. While, we are sort of really interested in this neurosequential modeling and all its potential, we really want to be in context all the time and acknowledging the diversity of contexts and just how rich, even the concept of feeling goosebumps in response to either participating in music making or listening, that has really different cultural and spiritual significance in different cultural communities, and listening to that wisdom as well, knowledge, those traditions, and finding ways to bring that into the thinking otherwise, I think would be amazing as learnings from this. But thank you again, Marilyn, so much. So I'm now handing us over to close the second iteration of the talking circle with Charu. So let's hear from you, Charu. Where are you at the moment?
Yeah, I've been writing stuff because stuff that's being said is so profound. Thanks so much, Kerry, Karen, and Marilyn, and Naomi. Because the servant volley it's not just in music, but also in research, because the more we get reflected, the more we think and rethink and rehash and think the unthinkable. I really like that, Marilyn. So I've been thinking, well, with Kerry's model, there are four stratified layers, but music has, I think, the capacity to address all of them at once, as we have spoken. So I'm not saying anything that's new, but then on the other side, I'm looking at methodology and going, well, large-scale surveys and systematic kind of theorizing, top to bottom, yeah, that's good. However, in this kind of where I'm working from with real people in there, I mean, smaller groups of people from various kind of environments, and I keep going back to the granular grassroots level of operation, where these truths and different ontologies and episteme will actually emerge and unfold in front of our eyes. And then these theories and, you know, what we read about the conceptual models and the overarching things will get bolstered, substantiated, legitimized, but also kind of directly feed into the community. Because I think this project, one of the most beautiful things about this project is we're talking about lives, young minds, young hearts, but young lives and music. So it's a whole thing, I think, that is being crafted here. And going back to your thoughts, Marilyn, on fatherhood as well, and the way in which, you know, regardless of gender, this care and this kind of an integrative approach really to parenting that privileges. So when the methodology then becomes about the grassroots, about the granularity, rather than, you know, so let's send out 50 surveys and get responses, because a lot of them do not speak English, they don't, you know. So one-to-one correspondence is sitting with people, spending time with people, having a coffee, just having spaced out chats for like 3 hours with someone you just have met. But you're making sense of what's happened in the sessions. I think that kind of talks to subjectivity and cultural ownership as well. So people from different cultures are actually saying what they think to be true. And then the knowledges that are constructed based on those assumptions and ontologies that are being built because of the grassroots work then feeds into knowledge. I think that's the very egalitarian, democratic way, equitable way to inclusively construct knowledge. And this project actually speaks to a way in which we can do this together here and now. Projects like these, I mean, the Young Lives and music, and, you know, whether it is through playing the guitar and having a small group of people hear it and then talk about their subjective experiences. So I think more talking circles, more privileging of subjectivity, the more voices. Going back to the point of voice, it's about agentic, unlocking those agentic fields of operation that can then be operationalized to create the whole. So I'm all about ground up, and I see this being ground up. And yeah, I really like where this is going. So in my mind, I was thinking, you know, if we think of Kerry's as a conceptual model or a go-to model, and Karen's as a way forward, as a practical model, and Marilyn as a conceptual framework. And I don't know who I am, but I think I'm like a reflector that plays ball. I'm standing on the other side of a table and I'm playing table tennis. You know, there's a tempo to it, there's a feel to it, because I'm a singer, I'm a musician, that's what I do. So I'm just going to sing to Naomi, because I told you guys in the beginning that I had come with a song, but I've spoken a lot. So I'll quickly sing a lullaby from my land, Tamil Nadu in South India. கண்ணான கண்ணுக்கு கண்ணோகு வராதே, சுண்ணாம்பும் மஞ்சளுமா சுத்தியடி கண்ணாக்கு, ஆராரோ ஆரிரரோ யாரடிச்சு நீ எழுத சுண்ணாம்பும் மஞ்சளுமா சுத்தியடி கண்ணாக்கு ஆராரோ ஆரிரரோ ஆராரோ ஆரிரரோ ஆராரோ ஆரிரரோ.
Thank you, Charu. Gorgeous. And what a way to end that second iteration of the talking circle. Beautiful. And it's great to see just that little snapshot of the work that you have been doing at Logan too, Charu, and that sharing of lullabies across different cultures, really across the world, in that small little collective space. So thank you. And thank you for all of that table tennis you just did in terms of reflecting back. What a great metaphor. And really that giving and receiving, that dynamic, that essence of bond and relationship and connection that seems to be a really common metaphor across all of the disciplinary sort of perspectives we've brought to, and practical perspectives we've brought today, is one that I'm definitely walking away with. What strikes me is every time we come together as a group, the learnings abound. I think I'm picking that up from everyone here, but I just want to give really sincere thanks to you all for your generosity of spirit, and just the sharing that's happening in this group is really inspiring. And inspiring is a word that many members of the collective have used to describe what's going on. Let's surf this wave for as long as we can, in recognition and respect of everything that people have spoken about today and in our previous meetings with the larger group. But just as our very final word in the recorded session today, can we quickly whip around? But this time we're going to go anti-clockwise, just in terms of a bit of interesting different dynamic. And can I just have one or two single words that, if us as a little microcosm, a little representative of the broader collective, what are 1 to 2 words that summarise your wish for our ongoing activities as a collective in the next 12 months and hopefully beyond? It could be your wish, it could be a deep feeling or response to today's conversation even, that you just hope can continue on and be shared more widely. So I'm going to put you on the spot, Charu, as the 4th member, and then we'll go back through Marilyn, Karen, and finish with Kerry.
Yeah, so I've got a like a marketing slogan kind of thing, which is 3 words that came to mind, and that is every voice matters.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, Marilyn.
I still think I'm stuck with voice and the notion of voice being more than just us talking. I don't know how to say it, but I just love that idea of voice. So I'll just leave it there.
Great. Thank you. Karen.
I wrote down 4 words, which I actually wasn't intending to share. I just wrote them down for myself, that came out of this for me. But now that I've been asked, I will share them. Connection, freedom, play, and creativity.
Nice. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Karen. And Kerry.
I guess I wrote down a couple of things too. So, and I really liked, these came from other people, so it's not from me, but the show and evoke, don't tell.
Yeah.
That means a lot. And that empathetic listening and understanding, whether that comes from, whether that's within the group or, this is more than a few words, isn't it? Within the group or outside the group, is that achievement, I guess. Thank you.
And can I just say to Kerry that was the one, if you know, if I could have another go. The one I have in a big heart on my page is that. It's about showing, not telling. Yeah.
I love that too. Showing, not telling. We don't need to prove. We can show. We can evoke. We can invite. Yeah, absolutely. And the word that keeps coming into my head is healing. And I think I really feel similar to Kerry in that I think that this can be a healing space for the researchers to come together for themselves and as a collective, and then to share that and open that up in reciprocal learning relationships, in evocative and provocative learning relationships with everyone that we work with and invite and follow into these spaces. So that would be my word, is healing, and in many directions. So thank you, wise, talented, inspiring people. And we look forward to sharing this with the broader audience.
Yep. Thanks very much, everyone, on behalf of the Queensland Conservatorium Research Centre. It's been an absolute pleasure to instigate and reflect and enjoy each other's company. Thank Naomi for the initiative.
Yes.
And we do hope, the QCRC and the School of Social Work, we do hope that a lot comes out of this. Yes, young lives matter. All lives matter. Black lives matter.
Yeah.
Great feeling.
Can't wait that we can till we can actually sit in a circle, have a coffee.
Yeah, be live.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Yes, thank you.